Hi, Kyle Barton with BB Custom Tools. And in this video, I'm going to show you how to set up the seat drilling guide to drill your mortises into your seat blank. In this video, I'll show you how to use the angle gauge as well as an alternative method to doing that. So first off, let's use the angle gauge. So with the seat drilling guide, included is this angle gauge. This angle gauge here has markings that show you each angle you're going to be drilling. And the angle gauge also has this long line here. This is what you actually line up on your sight line, the bottom of the gauge right here. And that gets you in the correct orientation. It also has this T-nut, and that goes into one of these rails here, this one right there. And it slides on here. And it has a stop here at the end, and that stops at the end of the left runner. And then you can just tighten this little brass thumb screw up and everything is locked into place. It's not going anywhere. It's great as you're moving around the seat blank as well as for storing it. So what we have here is some mystery pine, and we're going to be setting up to drill a hole right here where these two lines intersect. The red line here is going to represent our sight line, and this black line here, you do not need this when drilling. This is just for, I guess, demonstration purposes. The reason this black line here is because I wanted to let you know that when you line everything up, so if you line the bottom of this up with your sight line and you line up the end of your runners with this perpendicular line, you are going to be drilling exactly at 90 degrees. In fact, this is how I set up and calibrate the angle gauge to each of these seat drilling guides. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to bring you in closer, but I just wanted to get a little distance shot of how we line everything up to drill at 16 degrees. And don't worry, I'll put a drill bit in a shaft in here in a second. But first off, so if we're going to go 16 degrees, excuse me as I peek over here, that we would simply line the bottom of this up with our sight line and then go to 16 degrees right there. Then we would clamp everything up, verify that we're still at 16 degrees, nothing moved on us. Then we would remove the angle gauge and then go ahead and drill. So let me get you in closer here so you can see how this all works, and go ahead and put a shaft and drill bit in here so you can see how that works too. All right, so I have you in closer here, so let's go ahead and set this up. So we're drilling right there where that little red circle is. So we move on to 16 degrees right there, line everything up with our sight line. So we're ready to drill. So at that point, I would clamp everything down and then simply move that away and then drill. So let me go ahead and put a drill bit in here and we can see how that looks. All right, so we have the drill bit here, and you can see why this parking lot here is so important. It gives a place for your drill bit to rest while you get everything positioned correctly. So we'll go back here. We'll hit 16 degrees right there. Make sure everything's on our sight line. At this point in time, like I said, I would clamp everything up, make sure nothing moved, then take the angle gauge out and put the drill bit in the hole, attach our drill, and we're ready to go. So that is the most common way to go ahead and set this up. That works for 99.9% of your operations. However, there might be a situation where you need to drill in this direction. Instead of drilling towards the tower here, you're going to be drilling towards away from the tower. So how would you set that up? Basically, it's very much the same. What you can do in that instance is go ahead and use your angle gauge again, but in this time we're going to flip it around, and I will bring you in close so you can see that. So what I wanted to note here is the angle of these lines with each of the degrees from 1 to 30.
Those angles represent the direction you want to drill in, so the direction you want to have this in. So you can see when you're drilling back towards the tower, these are angled in that direction. So if you're drilling away from the tower, like I said, how would you do that with this particular angle gauge? Actually, it's very simple. Let me change the setup around and I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so I got everything turned around here so that we can go ahead and show you how we would drill away from the tower. So where we want the drill bit going in this direction. So the first thing I would do, let's say we're drilling in this case at 14 degrees. So I would go ahead and take my setup block and I would set it at 14 degrees right there and line the bottom edge of the angle gauge there with the sight line. And then when I'm at 14 degrees here, I would go ahead and put a mark right here at the end. Okay, so we want to go ahead and extend this mark over across this line, and I'll show you the reason for that here in a second. So the easiest way to do that, I don't know if it's going to be exact, but I got a 6-inch rule here. I'm going to put 3 inches on this side of the line and the 3-inch mark on this side of the line. That's going to be close enough for chair making. So I'm just going to extend that line across. So what we do at that point in time is go ahead and reinstall our angle gauge back into there. And let me switch this around so you can see it. So we turn this around. And then all I have to do at this point in time is go ahead and line up again, the bottom of the angle gauge with our sight line and go ahead and get right here to where we're at our mark. So once we're at our mark, then at that point in time, I would clamp everything down, verify that we're still along our sight line and at our mark there. And we can then place our drill bit here. And we're going to be drilling at 14 degrees in this direction. So that is how you can use the angle gauge to go ahead and drill both towards the tower and away from the tower. Like I said, 99% of the time, unless you run into a interesting situation, you're going to be drilling back towards the tower. But you can do both ways. So let me show you another technique for setting this guide up. All right, let me show you the other method for locating your mortises using the seat drilling guide. And that is using one of these digital angle cubes. This is basically what this is called, is angle cube. And the first thing we want to do is go ahead and get this here and zero it out. So make sure that everything's copacetic. And then we can go ahead and use that to set our angles. Now, one of the things we don't have is, since we do not have our wooden angle gauge in here, we have no way of identifying the sight line. Well, there are a number of techniques you can do. Since it's 2 inches between these runners, you can use a rule. Now, a rule out of a double square or a combination square in the 6 or 12-inch variety, and this happens to be a 6-inch one, they're 1 inch wide. So you can go ahead and put those in here and use that to reference against your sight line, just like that. Now you can also use a 1, 2, 3 block. If you're not familiar with the 1, 2, 3 block, this is used in machinist operations. So this 1, 2, 3 block is precisely ground, so it is 3 inches long, 2 inches in height, and 1 inch wide. So since it's 1 inch wide, you can also use that in here. And since this is a little bit shorter, I've also made these rear runners long enough to where you can use that machinist block back here in the rear section. So you can line up this edge here against your sight line. So that gives you a couple of different alternatives to line this up. Now, let's say we wanted to use the angle cube with our rule to drill a hole at, let's say, again, we're going to drill one at 16 degrees. So we would simply utilize this. I'm going to have to utilize this on the back end and go ahead and move that in. And we can simply set this here and just move that till we're at 16 degrees and go back. This does have an error of 0.1 degrees. So as long as that's close enough for me. At that point in time, just make sure that you're aligned with your sight line, which I wasn't. So let me increase that a little bit. Oops, a little bit too much. There we go, that's close enough. So at this point in time, I would go ahead and clamp everything down, and we just move to 16.1 degrees. There we go, at 16 degrees. So at that point, I would go ahead and clamp everything down, then confirm that we're in the proper orientation, again with that, and go. As you can see, this technique is rather fiddly. It is actually what I use when I calibrate this, so I will have a video on how I calibrate it, but I calibrate it both at the 0 point, at a 4 degree, at a 16 degree, and at a 26 or 27 degree. So I make sure that this thing is calibrated throughout, and that's basically what I use. Now, like I said, this one has an error rate of 0.1 degree. I would say in the calibration of this, I might be off another 0.05 degree. So I would say this is probably accurate within 0.15 degrees, which is plenty accurate for chair making. So that gives you another technique on how to go ahead and set this up. Like I said, when you do this, you can put the angle gauge here. You can also put it here. You can attach it here. It's a little bit dicey there, but I like to attach it there or attach it up here. Now, one of the things, as you can see, is we're attaching it. We're at 16.10, so back it off just a little bit. There we go. We're at 15.95. Like I said, that's close enough for chair making, and we're right on our sight line. So, like I said, clamp that up and you're good to go. So that's another technique you can use to go ahead and set your angles. And of course, this works in either degree. You'll, of course, want to attach it on this side and set your angle that way. But that works in either direction. So those are the two methods to go ahead and locate your mortise in your seat blank using the seat drilling guide. So I appreciate you watching, and for more information, check out bbcustomtools.com.